spent my first 15 years trying to get out of the woods because I thought it was horrible. And I spent the next 20 years trying to get back. The truth of the matter is we need to be well-rounded individuals like our forefathers were.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to episode number 76 of Mountain Readiness, where we talk about homesteading, survival preparedness, and anything self-reliance related. I'm your host, T, with Mountain Readiness, coming at you here from Appalachia, right here in the hills of Wilkes County. I see some people out there in the crowd. I see comments coming in. Don't forget, guys, if you would, hit that like button. It's much appreciated. It takes just a split second to smack that thing. Give us a little love out there in social media land. We need all the help we can get. Big hi to Sandra Davis out there. Patrick 7, what's going on, man? Burke Springs, my man Tom Bryce. Love you, brother. The Virginia Bushcrafter. Howdy to you too, sir. I've got a lot of people here in the chat. Mr. Survival Gear BSO. Good old Brian Loftus. And remember, guys, Brian will be joining us again here in May. So back in the saddle with Mr. Brian Loftus with Survival Gear BSO. What do we got here? This episode is brought to you by Soil Saviors. Soil Saviors. Remember, if you want nutrient-dense food, you need nutrients-dense soil. You can't have one without the other. Soil has been beat all to pieces. We need to get it back with all those healthy microbes and all that stuff, all that kind of good stuff. So make sure to scan that QR code if you have not already. Get yourself that Soil Saviors. It works. I use it. We don't promote anything here on this show that we don't actually use ourselves. And next, of course, the Sovereign Health Summit coming up in October. Of course, this is with Barbara O'Neill, Dr. Tenpenny, Doc Lee Merritt, Jonathan Otto, AJ Richards from the farm, our friend Pat Militich, Doc Will Spencer, all of these natural healers, people that are bringing you natural, alternative, and circadian health. 5 days for the summit. Remember, you can have all the best gear. You can have all the skills, but unless you have that health, it's just stuff, guys. Health is number one prep. The end of story. And of course, Mountain Readiness coming up in May. If you have not got your tickets, do so, because it's going to be a great time. We keep adding instructors. Our guest tonight is one of those folks that will be joining us there, going to be doing some awesome classes, book signing, hanging out, doing all the things May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And don't forget, too, that we have paid classes, intensive outside of Mountain Readiness. We've got Carl Erickson with Tactical Rifleman is doing some combat pistol class. We've got still the Troy's Gate. If you have not done the Troy's Gate experience, shame on you. Everyone should have to do Troy's Gate. I'm just saying. I'm telling you that right now. Check them out. There's just a little bit on YouTube about them. You're not going to see a lot of stuff. You got to do it in person to really get the full gist. The videos just do not give it any justice. So scan that. Our friend Randy over there with Troy's Gate. And remember, this is right in Lenoir. So if you are at Mountain Readiness, plan on Monday. That's when we carve out a spot for you guys to go over and experience Troy's Gate for yourself. Unlike any preparedness, mental preparedness training you have ever seen. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. I've been there like 14 or 15 times now. So let's get into, remember tonight, if you have a question for our guest, hashtag wild, throw it in the comments. The Russ of Oz, the man behind the curtain who's pulling all the levers and pushing all the buttons, will flag that for me, and we will work to get that up on the screen for our guest tonight. So let's talk about tonight. Tonight we are joined by Kevin Estela, lifelong outdoorsman, educator, author, and one of the most respected voices in modern survival training. Raised in New England, inspired by his father's World War II survival experience in the Philippines, Kevin's path was shaped early by resilience and self-reliance. His love for rivers led him to become a kayaking and canoeing guide and instructor, building a foundation in leadership and hands-on learning. For 14 years, Kevin balanced teaching high school history and working as a professional survival instructor, bringing lessons of the past into real-world application. A lifelong student of his craft, he trains across the globe and field tests gear in the demanding environments and collaborates with leading outdoor brands. Best-selling author and prolific writer, Kevin is now a sought-after trainer and speaker whose mission is simple yet and powerful: education through experience for people everywhere, helping others live with greater purpose. So let's get into it. Bring out our guest, Mr. Kevin Estela. Kevin, appreciate you being here, man.
Hey, thank you so much, T, and I appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. Let those questions, let them fly, guys. Let's have some fun with this one and see how quickly we can make an hour go by.
That's it. And look, and guys, I write all this stuff down. I get my notes, but here's the truth of it. And I apologize to Kevin because I did not realize how deep Kevin Estela goes. And shame on me, because I should have studied a whole lot sooner this stuff that you've been doing. This is a pretty broad question, but for those who are stupid like I am, who is Kevin Estela?
All right. Well, that can be answered a lot of different ways, but
and you can answer it however you want to. I mean, we'll get into a lot of questions, but give like just the gist, the short background, because I really want to start off with your father and grandfather, because that story just blew me away. That is just off the hook.
Yeah, so we can start there, right? I mean, we all wear so many different hats. So I think the easiest and the earliest hat I can describe is the outdoorsman hat, right? I grew up in New England, loved canoeing, kayaking, fishing, mountain biking, all the things that a kid does when you have all four seasons and an unbelievable place to do all these activities in. So, I grew up in New England. I'm the youngest of three, born into an amazing family. My dad recently retired from being a physician. My mother was his office manager. So I saw a beautiful relationship between those two for 54 years, that they were together. Absolutely amazing. And, as a kid, like I said, I was into all these different activities, and those activities never went away. They've only got magnified and amplified over the years, becoming a retail sales associate at a sporting goods store, learning more about the technical side of gear, which I didn't know it at the time, but that would eventually set me up for doing what I do now, working with different companies on the consultation side of the house. Another hat that I wear, right, I'll throw this one on there, is an educator. And as you mentioned, I spent 14 years as a high school history teacher. I spent many years as a canoeing and kayaking instructor. And in 2007, I got my start at the Wilderness Learning Center as a survival instructor under Marty Simon. And I taught there eventually as lead survival instructor from 2007 to 2012. I ran my own company in Connecticut for a while, Estela Wilderness Education. That's where my username comes from on a lot of social media, Estela Wild Ed. It's just short for Estela Wilderness Education. And then I eventually left teaching at the high school to work out in Utah for Fieldcraft Survival, where I was the director of training, and eventually left Fieldcraft after moving from Connecticut to Utah to now North Carolina. I left there in 2024 to start Kevin Estela LLC, where I'm doing more of what I want at my own pace with the companies that want to work with me and I want to work with them. And as you mentioned, creating a lot of content, video form, creating articles, and obviously two books that I'm very, very proud of. And I guess the third and final hat, I'll say that I'm a student, right? I mean, I am an outdoorsman. I am an educator, but I'm always a student. I love learning. I love constantly putting on a white belt, doing something brand new for the first time. And that's always, something that I always keep in my mind. Like, how can I learn from others? Because it just makes me better at what I do when I put on those other two hats. So I'm
Wow.
ridiculously hungry for knowledge. And, I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in May and learning from other folks when I'm at the Readiness Expo.
Absolutely, and we're super stoked about having you, and now even more so that I've got a lot more into your background. I we can start there. Like, my father before I was born decided that the world no longer mattered to him, and so my first 15 years was off grid. My father decided to move out in the middle of nowhere, no electricity, no running water. I mean, family of 5 living in a 4-person tent for over a year in the Ozarks, cooking on campfires. I ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I left home at 15, traveling around, ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana at 17 to take a job for the Amish as a driver. And that's where I really got into the trades real heavy. And I've been a tradesman for my entire life now. But, and that was like, what was it, 79 moves and 36 states that I'd lived in by the time I was 17. But I thought I had an interesting upbringing until I heard about your father and grandfather living in a cave for over 4 years, like fighting for their lives. I mean, can we talk about your father and grandfather? What happened? How did this work? I mean, that is hardcore survival right there.
Oh, definitely. And I've got notes galore. I plan on telling this whole story in book number 3, right? I've always wanted to write 3 books. The first book for the student, the second book for the teacher, the third book telling my family's history and, exploring the jungle. But I will say this, it's not glorious, right? Like, it's something, people think living in the jungle, living off the land, that type of thing, like, oh, I've seen this in Hollywood, it must be incredible. Well, my father almost died from whooping cough. And there were multiple occasions where the Japanese Imperial Army were very close to the cave entrance where my family and multiple families lived. So, you imagine living all those years not in the security of your home in the wilderness where anything could happen and there was so much unknown and uncertainty. So, for anyone that thinks like, oh my gosh, I want to do that, it's, my father is a walking miracle for being able to survive that. Now, the long and the short of the story, in January of 1942, the Japanese Imperial Army invaded the Philippines shortly after bombing Pearl Harbor. My grandfather was incredibly patriotic for the American cause. He was Spanish Filipino, and he was very outspoken against the Japanese actions, which made him a very wanted man by the Japanese. So he moved the family and a lot of the townspeople into the jungle, and they lived there from approximately January 1942 until August of 1945. Now, when my family left the jungle, from what my father taught me, and from what I've heard from my uncles, the family house was destroyed. Anything that had water in it could have been used as a bathroom. Things that they had in the house were looted. There were bullet holes everywhere. Really destroyed. So my father was very much an advocate. Like, hey, as much as possible, protect your home as much as possible. Your home is your fortress, your castle, that type of thing. And he said, I've seen war. It's ugly. Never be confused that war is glamorous. It's something that we should avoid if we can at all costs. And my dad said it from the heart. But that being said, that story as a kid is what excited me, because I grew up in the 80s when Red Dawn was a movie that was so common. First Blood was a movie that was so common. All these movies where there's an evasion element. And here's my dad telling me and showing me in the backyard, like, this is how we would build fires, and this is how we can make a trap. And, my dad was incredibly clever when I was younger, showing me how to do some things like, okay, here's how you take an umbrella apart, and you can use some rubber bands and sharpen the forks in the umbrella, and you can make a dart shooter that you can use for hunting.
Wow.
I'm like, what? So
awesome.
as a
I
kid,
mean, he had to be clever like that, though. I mean, did they?
Yeah.
not to cut you off, but how did it? I mean, did they just like grab whatever they could grab and head off into the jungle? I mean, how did that actually go down?
Very much like that. It was a matter of let's get up there as quickly as we can. And keep in mind, even though there was Japanese imperial occupation of the Philippines, there were still Filipinos coming and going every single day. But much like the forest in World War II that terrified the Nazis, right? The Belarus forest, the Belarus Jews that hid in the forest, they were feared. The Japanese didn't want to venture too far in the forest because there were stories upon stories of indigenous people all throughout the Pacific wreaking havoc on the Japanese, like the headhunters of Indonesia hated the Japanese and would take in airmen that crash in the jungles. And
Right.
My family was just very, very lucky, and they had to become very resourceful. So as a kid, my dad would tell me stories of like, yeah, your grandfather went into the woods with only a 22 and a 1911, right? So he had a 22 Mossberg that fed through the buttstock, similar to like the Browning 22, the Auto 22, and then he had a 1911. And I was like, well, that's it, just a 22. But my dad was like, well, your grandfather would fill the hollow points with a poison that was made from a plant called dita. And dita is a form of curare, which is like a toxin. So even if you got shot in the arm or in the leg, the dita would eventually run through your body and kill you. So I mean,
Wow.
it's a wild story. And I've had people say, you need to, yeah, go ahead.
That's one of the most American things I've ever heard. But he was Filipino, like running around with a 1911. I mean, that's as American as it gets. But yeah, poison tipped 22s and a 1911. Like, I can't even imagine. We rely so much on gear in this day and age, it seems like. And he's out there with a 22 and a 1911 and probably a machete or something.
Oh yeah, and the word that all Filipinos use to describe large knives is bolo, or at least my family did. And I know I was warned not to pull things out on YouTube, or else it'll get banned. But I eventually designed a bolo for my friend Scott Gossman, who's a custom knife maker, and it was based on a drawing that my father made for me of the bolo that he carried in the Philippines. So
Wow.
with just a bolo and a little bit of resourcefulness, you can live very well in the jungle. But I'll say this, my father, after that whole experience, when I was a little kid and I was like, Dad, I want to go hunting. Dad, I want to do this. I want to do this outdoors. My father would say, you live in America, the greatest country on the planet, and we can turn on hot water and get hot water anytime we want it. And we can go to the grocery store and we can get 20 different types of orange juice if we want that. Why would you want to do that? Right. So my father initially was like, look, you're living a good life, live it. But he ultimately, being an amazing father, said, you know what, if you want to learn these skills, I'll teach you these skills. And those skills were the spark that started it all for me.
Man, and I can kind of resonate with what your father, his mindset on that, because I remember growing up, man, it was brutal. It was difficult. And I would tell you that one of the hardest things, I would say, for me growing up was not trying to keep a fire going, because, and I've talked about this many times on the show, but people, they don't get the understanding. And just like you said about, watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. Oh, I want to do that. It's so cool and all that kind of stuff. But, firewood was a full-time job. Packing water was a full-time job. I mean, you got 5 people. How many gallons of water do you need for drinking and cleaning and washing? Fire is something that you keep rolling all the time, most generally, because you don't want to start a fire 3 times a day and let it get good coals to cook a meal, because my mother cooked on a wood burning stove or on a campfire. So it was nonstop keeping that rolling. But those were not the hard parts. For me, the hard part was dealing with yourself all the time. And I can't even imagine, because we did as a family still go to town, still go places and see civilization. But with the way your father and grandfather and your family were living, I mean, they couldn't just go in and hang out and break the monotony. That had to just be deafening, that silence all the time.
Not to mention, they lived very nocturnally. It was safer for them to venture out in the dark. And my father would draw sketches for me as a little kid. Like my father, if he wasn't going to go into medical school, he was going to become an architect. So my dad could draw like it was no one's business. And he would draw pictures of like a person holding a lantern with a spear. And he had all the details correct, like the spearhead being underwater, right? As opposed to like, you know, what you see in a lot of Hollywood where they're throwing the spear from a mile away and it happens to hit the fish and there's no consideration for refraction. But like my dad would tell me all this stuff and he's like, that's what we did. We had to stay hidden during the daytime and we could go out at night, and that's when we would gather and hunt and whatnot. And where they were, it was at a base of a ravine where, according to my father, he said that you couldn't see the top of the ravine because there was like an overhang, and he said that they had a false like jungle wall that they could put up that hid the entrance. So I've got a rough idea of where it is in the Philippines. It's on a family friend's neighboring property. And with modern satellite imaging and, you know, my friends at a couple of these companies that do that, I might have an opportunity to find that cave and maybe find some artifacts that are still there from 1942.
That would be amazing to
Wouldn't that be a great book?
That would book 3, like you said, book 3. You need those pictures in book 3 because that would be just insane. I couldn't even imagine. And for that matter, I couldn't even imagine with the way I grew up, that there just that trumps everything that I experienced, you know, just always hiding and trying to, you know, elude people who want to do you harm. You know, I mean, it was just that would just be an insane. And I can see though why your father, you know, was like, why would you want to do this? You know, after all those years of doing that, you know, why would you want to go out in the middle of the woods and you know, learn all these primitive skills when you can just flip a switch? And I get it. Like, you know, I've gotten a little laxed and, you know, I can turn the light on and stuff, but there is something about getting back to nature like that.
Mm-hmm.
How did your family end up getting here to the States then?
So my father came here in 1965 as a first-year medical resident, right? So he finished up his medical school in the Philippines. He went to Santo Tomas over there, and then, you know, he came here, landed in California, and, you know, he almost didn't make it to Connecticut because my dad, it has a weakness for blondes. I mean, if you met my mother, knew my mother, you'd understand. So my dad had a weakness for blondes, and he didn't want to leave California, but he eventually made it to Connecticut, where, you know, he worked, eventually met my mother, and that's how he got here. Now, he followed a family friend, another doctor who I'm still friends with his son, and there's a whole, you know, group of us from my hometown or neighboring towns. All of our fathers, they went to medical school together, and all their kids are roughly about the same age, give or take 5 or 10 years. So, you know, we're all still very close. We still talk to each other. You know, it's just one of those generational things.
So comes to the States. He's a doctor. Now let's talk about your career choice of becoming a history teacher. And there had to been some pushback and flack, I'm sure, from your father going into as a history teacher versus becoming a doctor. I would imagine.
Well, let's forget that, you know, not all of us are born with incredible minds, right? Like my brain is more history English than it is science and math, right? I always joke and I say I am the atypical Asian or atypical half Asian who can drive really well and is terrible at math. So with that being said, you know, when I was a kid, it was like, okay, yeah, medical school, that sounds cool, you know, like all these years of your life to become a doctor. And, you know, my dad never pushed for that because the career that my dad had at an early age is not the career that he had when I was 18, 19, 20 in college, that whole thing. Like medicine has changed. My father, you know, like I said, only a couple of years ago, he retired, but he always had that bedside manner to him. And going to, you know, different doctors, newer doctors, they're not cut from the same cloth, with the exception of my current doctor, who I love to death. Dr. Art, if you're listening, love you, buddy. But that being said, my dad did not push back on me becoming a teacher. He thought that there was something to be said about that. You know, he thought that there was a sophistication to it. You know, I just wish I could explained to him what it's like, when a 14-year-old kid is mother effing you. It didn't happen all the time, but that being said, there was never any pushback. My father said never stop studying, and I never have. And me being a teacher, I stayed in that academic field. I continued to study because we know that some of the best teachers out there are also great students. And even though I didn't have the science and math brain that, would have made medical school, the logical choice, I did have the English history brain. And that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with history. I just loved learning the concepts and the trends and, the patterns that exist throughout history. And I tend to live my life by recognizing patterns. And when I teach survival classes, I'm talking about patterns and breaking things down into the most simple form to remember, right? Shelter has components of inside, over, and under. Cordage has length, strength, and flexibility, right? Like the list goes on and on and on. That's something that my father never said, oh, you only became a teacher, right? It was never that. My dad, like I said, is an amazing human being, and he's always been supportive of me, even when I changed careers, going from teaching at a public school with a very steady job, a pension, summers off and all that great stuff, to working at a very chaotic job for 4 years and doing my own thing. So right. There's never any pressure for me to become a doctor or anything like that.
I mean, that is awesome. Now, your father too is not a young guy. I mean, no disrespect, but
no,
I remember I was reading something that your father was born in, what did you say, 39?
Yeah. He's 87.
And so we have a lot in common there, because my father was born in 36 and I'm the oldest of three. And so my father is 90 years old now. And, he's lived the mountain man life his entire, since I was born all the way through. My younger brother actually just moved out to the Ozarks. He finally settled down outside of, in between Branson and Springfield, Missouri, out in the middle of nowhere. Lived out there by himself for umpteen years, splitting his own firewood. Would go to town maybe once a month. And all the way up, lifts weights every single day. He's just the Jack LaLanne. Oh yeah. He can still he's almost bench press 300 even to this day at 90 years old, and pull ups. And the guy can do flip over the bar. Mm-hmm. It's repulsive to say the least, seeing my father at 90 years old. He can outdo me, I'd say, on some of that stuff. But, that is, that's got to be different too with that older generation, that upbringing. I remember my father at the end of the Depression, was born. And so, we didn't waste anything. We didn't throw anything away. It was you conserve, you reuse it, you recycle it. I can't even count how many pounds of nails that I've straightened back out in my life. But was it the same for you, that mentality with your father?
Oh, very much so. Anyone that grows up in a Filipino home knows that Chinese food containers get recycled and they are used until they crack. We had a drawer full of shopping bags that were used for nothing, but they were there just in case they needed to be used for something, right? My father and my mother both had the tendency of hoarding, right? And that is part and parcel of growing up in that generation, right? Like when we eventually cleaned out my parents' house, my father lives with my sister now, but when we cleaned out their house, it was multiple dumpsters of just stuff. Objects that were in just objects in disrepair. Like, why are you still holding on to that? But they didn't want to let it go. And again, that's coming from my mother's side. My grandmother lived during the Great Depression. My father lived during a war. So you put those two together and you get a house that's filled with stuff from the attic down to the basement, right? Right. And to some degree, I catch myself doing that now, where I'm like, why am I holding on to this? Right. And then sometimes
it's tough. It's tough to let stuff go sometimes. I remember we used to live, there was a time we lived all over Missouri, but I remember specifically we would go to Springfield, Missouri, and on Thursdays, Bass Pro Shops, the Bass Pro Shops main headquarters was in Springfield. And on Thursdays, they would throw all the pallets out behind the Bass Pro Shops and you could pick them up. If you didn't get them by the end of the day, they threw them in the incinerator. And so we would drive over there with the trailer every Thursday. We would pick up all the pallets. And I mean, I will tell you this, you know, they're bringing in these boats and all these pallets. Some of these pallets were, you know, 2x8, 2x10 solid oak beams and stuff that they brought these big boats in. But then we would bring those back to the house, and my job was to take them all apart and remove all the nails and then straighten the nails and put the nails into 5-gallon buckets and stack all the lumber. And to this day, my father has like 10 5-gallon buckets full of nails. Still have not went through them all. I mean, I have a deformed thumb from hitting it so many times, you know, trying to straighten these nails out. But that's, you know, guys and gals from that era, man, it was a different world. And they appreciated every single thing that they had. There's no doubt about it.
And I'll just add on to that real quick. So like as a kid growing up in the 80s, right, it was G.I. Joe, it was He-Man, it was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I grew up during the era where even Rambo had an action figure. And I love the fact that an R-rated movie had an action figure. And that's what I grew up with. Well, my dad was the best at making accessories for all the G.I. Joes and their fighting buddies. And,
oh, wow.
You know, I remember one time he had a couple 2x4s and he strung some string across it, and he like individually tied tongue depressors along the strings to make the suspension bridge. Because at the time, what was really popular, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, right? And there's a scene with you know, what's his name? Harrison Ford chopping the bridge. So like my dad would always build stuff, but he would make it out of other things. And that was something that always stuck with me. And in fact, you know, people might assume like, hey, you grew up, you know, a doctor's son. Oh, life was easy. Oh, you know, and listen, my father worked very hard. I'll never apologize for my father making life fantastic for us. But I will say that my dad grounded us in a very humbling way by having us travel, see the world, and see the reality that not everyone has it as good as us. So he built very patriotic kids, but he also built a lot of appreciation in us, because I remember one time I was like 5 years old, maybe 6 years old, and I was complaining like, oh, I want to go up to the toy store. Oh, you know, that type of thing. I remember my dad pulled off to the side of the road. He goes, listen, when I was your age, I had to make my own toys because we had no money.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that at 5 or 6. And I remember always thinking like, wow, there are people out there that don't have it the way I have it. And that was at age 5 or 6. And that's, hand to God, the truth. So even though, you know, I grew up very comfortably, you know, with my father doing what he did and having, you know, my sisters and my friends and all that, like there was always an understanding that, you know, life could be worse.
Yes.
So just be thankful, right? You know, say your prayers at night and be thankful in the morning when you're awake to say them again.
Absolutely. And I can appreciate that. And I know that as a fact, because I mean, coming, you know, where your father came from and his age, I know you guys didn't skate through on easy street. There's no doubt in my mind. It's just not going to happen. But I have setting here. Now, nobody gets to see this stuff. I have my little pin holder over here. And this here, because of what you said, you can appreciate this. I packed this around. This is one of the only things that I had as a child that I kept all these years. And I'm sure you know who that dude is right there.
I can't really see it in the screen. I see he's got sunglasses on.
Yeah. How about if I flip down his face?
Oh my gosh.
That is Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, the action figure. And dude, we were allowed to watch Terminator, and this is weird because we didn't have electricity and all this stuff. There was a few times we did, but most of the time we didn't. My father had, like, you know, we had the VCR, and he would hook it up to the batteries. We would have a battery. He would just run it through inverter, hook it up to batteries. We'd be sitting there around the campfire watching Terminator on the little 4-inch. Remember the little televisions that had the 4-inch screen? You could barely even see it. And we'd be sitting there watching Terminator. But because there was swearing in the movie, he would record over every spot where there was a swear word. So you'd be watching, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then all of a sudden he would say, you know, a swear word, and then it would go to a infomercial and be like, buy this now for $9.95, and then it would flip back to the movie. I'll never forget that, sitting around this campfire watching this Terminator movie with these little infomercial snippets just popping up left and right. It's weird things like that you just remind you of things, you know. But that was this was my favorite toy, man. It's my Arnold Schwarzenegger. Y'all don't make fun of me in May, all right? This is a collector's item. That's why I have this right here. So yeah, man, my little dude. 14 years as a history teacher. How did you decide that it was time to move on? And let me say this, I was a tradesman for over 25 years. I was a heavy truck mechanic and in the construction business. And I walked away from that a couple years ago because it was consuming my life. It was never ending. I was a regional operations director. I was overseeing states all over the United States. I was never home. I moved here to North Carolina 10 years ago to get back to basics and to have a homestead and to do the things that I felt it was time to do. And, but I was too busy chasing a dollar. But it was hard. It was hard for me to step away from that. I did it for so long. It was like, how do you leave this behind you? What was that for you? What made you make that transition?
Well, 2020 was a year that we all remember. 2020 was the year of COVID. And I remember, COVID set in, and as a teacher, we were told we're going to do everything remote. And we were taking bets, friendly bets around the teacher's table saying, like, are we going to be back by April 1? Are we going to be back by May 1? And one of my coworkers was like, we're not coming back. Like, this is going to change teaching. That being said, that summer, I was approached by my former boss, the owner of Fieldcraft, at the time. And it was shortly after I lost my late mentor, Marty. Now, to kind of do a little sidetrack and then come back to this, Marty was a Vietnam veteran. Marty was an Army survival instructor, a civilian survival instructor. He passed away in May of 2020. So I lose Marty, right? He's one of my best friends, my mentor. And shortly after that, I get a call from a guy who was in the military, not a survival instructor, but he ran a survival company. And he said, hey, I want you to join my company. I can offer you salary, benefits, but you'd have to relocate to Utah. Now, I wasn't certain. I didn't know if I wanted to do that or not. So I timed going out to Arizona, because that's where the office was at the time. I timed that with a class that I took at Gunsight. So I took a class at Gunsight, the 250 pistol class. And shortly after that class, I met up with the folks from Fieldcraft. And I was like, wow, this is a great group of people. I'm really enjoying it. We didn't have to do the social distancing thing. Like, they were people like me, and I felt like I was around the campfire again. So then after teaching a class with them, I go back to teaching at the high school, but not before I did the whole, let's put that Q-tip in your nose and, rattle your brain. Yeah. And I had a clean bill of health saying, hey, this guy has no COVID. Well, they made me quarantine for a week because I came from a high transmission state, even though I had the paperwork that said that I was clean. I was good to go. So I'm already angry. It's like, just put me in my classroom. I want to get back to teaching. I had planned to teach that final year, right? I was going to get to 15 years. I was like, I like the number 15. Let's just go with that. I spent 2.5, maybe 3 months in teaching. And I'm like, guess what, guys? I'm coming out early. I'll be there by January 1. Right. So I ended up leaving teaching. I joined Fieldcraft. I moved out to Utah. I worked out there for 2 years. Again, director of training, podcast host, lead blogger, lead content creator, that type of thing. Marketing team, all the things that we did at Fieldcraft. I did that for 4 years, with the last 2 of them being here in North Carolina. And then ultimately making the decision to leave Fieldcraft after having one too many disagreements with management and, just expectations not meeting reality in terms of what was offered and so forth.
Politics, those good.
Oh yeah, politics. There's politics everywhere. but I will say that. Yeah, I will say this. Even though I left Fieldcraft as a full-time employee, I'm going back to Fieldcraft. In fact, I have a meeting with them tomorrow because I still believe in the mission of the company and the new management. They're 2 amazing human beings and I trust with everything. So these are good human beings and I'm willing to go back and work as a contractor. Again, I still believe in the mission. I want to educate people out there and reach a broader audience.
You know, that's awesome. And I will say too, that there is something to be said. And I'm sure you feel that as well, as, you know, being self-employed. You know, you are your own boss. You're responsible for your own, you know, that paycheck, it's on you. And so, for me, like, that's just the ultimate in freedom for me. Like, becoming self-employed for me was like the hardest and best thing that I ever did. Because that is pure freedom as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, you're spot on. And I'll say this, like, it was a very strange year, 2025, because that was my first full calendar year operating my own business. And I didn't know how it was going to shake out. Like, I knew that I wasn't in the red, but I didn't know the extent of what I did or how well I did or anything like that until I did my books. It also helped me plan 2026. So now I can say, like, all right, I'm working with this company as a consultant. I'd like to get one or two more of those consultation positions, but I'm writing X number of articles for this company and X number of articles for that one. I have this many days that I can dedicate to being in front of students live teaching classes, but I don't need to make every weekend a training weekend, right? It's a much better work and life balance than I had for the past 5 years, right? Working for myself and working with Fieldcraft. But like you said, when you are self-employed, you get to decide, like, these are the projects I want to do. The only person that can make this succeed or fail is me, you know? And I've just been very careful with the companies that I've brought on, and I can be selective of the companies I work with. But I will say that the folks that, if they appear on my website or if you see me working with a company, it's for good reason. If you trust me, you can trust those companies, because I don't associate with anyone that is a bad business person.
No, and you're spot on. You're spot on, because I have had people reach out to me, want us to do affiliates with them, and and I refuse unless I try the product. I refuse unless I'm a part of it in some way, shape, or form, or use it. And I think that's really important in this day and age. I think, I'm not slamming anybody. I get it. You have to make a living. You have to make a dollar. We all are stuck in the rat race to a certain degree. But at the same time, I just really don't want to stick my name on something that sucks or goes against what I'm about. I want it to align with what I'm about and Mountain Readiness is about. Because people, when they watch this show and I say, hey, get some soil saviors, and then they buy this, if I don't know if the product is decent or not, I'm misleading the people that make up why I'm doing this to begin with. It's just, I hate seeing that. And there's a lot of people out there that they don't care. I mean, TikTok is full of them. You get on TikTok and, man, everybody's like, buy this, buy that. It's in the shopping cart. I'm like, nope, can't do it. Won't do it ever. So,
yeah, and I think people who are listening to this just need to be as good of an educated consumer as possible, and look at a person who's pushing a product, and then go to their social media and see how many products are they pushing, right? Because how many friends can you balance in your life, right? Most people, they say it's about 5 to 7. So if you think about it, like, do you really think that this person truly believes, puts all their heart and soul into 24 different products, or are those 24 products giving them a paycheck and they just happen to like them because they're getting paid? The other thing is, look at the messenger, right? There are some people out there, they might look the part, they might sound the part, but do they have any students, right? There's plenty of people out there that say that they're instructors, but you never see any of their class photos. And then they say, well, I teach people that are secret squirrel. It's like, you're not that cool. Is there anyone that you can point me to that's trained under you? Because I have to be educated as a buyer. Like, who are you? Why does your voice matter? And ultimately it comes down to the dollar, right? Like, there are people that'll do anything for the dollar and they have no integrity. Like, your name has value, and your name should carry respect. It shouldn't carry a price tag. But there are a lot of people out there that are like, oh, throw my name on there, but pay me, And that being said, on my side of the I don't know, the desk, or what do you want to call it, I have to be careful when people want to, force team with my name, where it's like, no. You can't post that saying that I back your product, because I'm already working with this company. Like, I have no problem saying that one of the companies that I work with is a company that I've known for 20 years, right? And this is when I was a customer of theirs, and now I'm sponsored by them. But like I've eaten dinner at their homes, right? Like
Right.
I've spent time with them. Like, no, you're not saying that I use their product when I'm 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 in with this company. Like they're my friends.
Yes.
So
No,
that's
that's
part of the
important.
industry. Yeah.
That's important, man, and I respect that. I'm glad to hear that because I'm a huge fan of practicing what you preach and products and being a part of that and knowing the people that you're working with. So props to you on that. I wanted to go take a little bit of a turn here because there's no doubt, you know, the whole COVID mess that changed the world. And now here lately, it seems like, man, we're just spiraling out of control, craziness left and right. Um, you know, the quote Shakespeare past his prologue. And look, I'm a dummy. I'm not smart, dude. The only reason I know this quote is because my wife has it tattooed on her own arm. You know, she was law enforcement, military, magistrate, all that type of stuff. But, you know, the past, we're getting to that 250-year mark. Are we looking at a reset? Do you think, in your opinion, do we have some really crazy stuff ahead of us? Or is this, you know, you think this is just going to level out?
Well, that was a question, a hypothetical that we used to pose as history teachers all the time, right? Like students would get questioned, like, what was the formative change in our nation? Most people would say it was the revolution, right? And they would say that the groundwork of America was in the colonies, and the revolution just set us on a new trajectory. Now, was that a reset or was that a redirection, right? Like even after the Civil War, okay, or the War of Northern Aggression, depending on what side you're on, right? We can say that that was a redirection instead of a complete reset, right? Because one side, things carried on their way, where the other side of the war, they had to adopt the ways as opposed to staying with the Confederacy. People have asked me, they're like, do you think there will be another civil war? And I've said, it will not look like the war that we had. It's not going to be along racial lines. If anything, lately, I would say it's along political, ideological lines, or I would say it's along cultural lines in terms of class, socioeconomic. But I don't know. I don't think we're going to have a reset like that. If there is a reset, or I should say a redirection, I think it'll be a dark period of our American existence. I don't think it's going to play out like people think it will. A lot of people are like, well, if someone does this, I'm going to break out this and that, and there's going to be bodies everywhere. And it's like, okay. And then when society regains itself, you're going to go to jail for being a mass murderer.
Right.
It's very, very interesting to listen to people, how they're talking, and people who have forgotten the past, which again, we have to look at the past because it explains where we're going. I think we're due for a redirection. And I don't know if that will be from an internal or an external force. But if you look at it, it's been 25 years since the last redirection of 9/11. You know what I mean? So I think we might see something like that again. And especially since, I mean, just the other day, the United States used Tomahawk cruise missiles and bombed parts of Iran. And shortly after that, there were retaliatory attacks in Texas and around. I fear that the redirection that we're going to see is not going to be on a single mass scale like 9/11 with the towers and Shanksburg, PA, and the Pentagon. But I think it's going to be isolated pockets, more looking like a guerrilla war that will make us feel very unsafe and untrusting. But that's my opinion, and that's just grounding off of what I've seen recently. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love where you went with that. And I agree. I know some people who have literally, since this administration, and like I said, I'm not going to go political with all this kind of stuff, but I will say that people seem to be very comfortable. A lot of people I know seem to be very comfortable that everything is going to be fine because of the current administration. Do you think that we've gotten laxed as Americans and just let our guards down? Are we even ready for that type of warfare like you just discussed. You know, these terrorist attacks, small, all over the place, coordinated on American soil.
Oh, we are definitely not ready. And years ago, one of my instructors, one of my friends, Tuhan Tom Kyer of Sayak Kali, he was part of an NRA publication called America's First Defense, or not publication, a media production, and he explained how the group that he is the director of, Sayak Tactical Group, they were hired by a law enforcement agency to act as role players, combat role players for a state police unit. And they took over a school, and they basically said, well, how hard do you want us to bring it to you? And what was interesting was they were like, oh, you know, you're going to go in the school. He's like, no, you don't understand. Like, we'll bring it. And they basically were using party poppers as simulated IEDs. They were using paintball guns on the roof to, you know, shoot at the helicopter when the helicopter landed on the roof with the SWAT guys. They did all this, and then they were like, we're going to go after the ambulances when they come in the front gate. And you think about it, like, we're expecting another mass shooting at, say, a school to look like all the other mass shootings that we've had, but we're not looking at events like that happened in Belsen, right? If you look at what happened in Russia, it was the worst school shooting, school mass murder of all time, and it was carried out by multiple actors, not one or two that were suffering mental illness or chemical illness to the brain because of, you know, chemical imbalance from all the stuff they would take. Right. So we are not ready because we don't have the imagination, or I should say, most of us in society don't have the imagination to think with a criminal mindset or a filter. So you think about it, like when you protect your home, you kind of put yourself into the mindset of a person trying to break into your home. And you know, that's comfortable for some people because they're like, okay, it's just breaking in, right? And I say it that way because no one wants to put themselves in the mindset of a mass murderer. But if you do for a second, you realize that everyone that has done what they've done to this point, they've done it with some proficiency, but they didn't do it with the professionalism of some of the foreign actors that have the training to pull that off. And that being said, if we're only waiting for one type of attack to happen here and another one happens, well, guess what? We go into that thing called the OODA loop, right? And we are totally trying to process, what do we do next? What do we do next? Because we didn't have the wherewithal to think about it ahead of time. So I don't think we are ready. The same way that we were not ready on 9/11 to see planes flying into towers. That threw all of us for a loop. And I'm worried that the next one will do the same.
Folks, if that doesn't make you want to go out and sign up and do training like what Kevin offers, there's no hope for you. I'm going to tell you, because that's the kind of stuff, thinking about those kind of stuff. And I don't want to get doom and gloom on all this kind of stuff, but it is. I mean, that's the whole point of training, right? Is to prepare ourselves mentally and physically if worst case actually becomes reality. You know, and so people in these other countries, they train like this. They've lived this way. That's all they do. That's all they know. And so, yeah, guys, you got to get out there and do some training. Let's check out. I know there was a couple questions here in the viewing audience. What do we got here? Mr. Tom Bryce said, where in New England were you from?
So I grew up in Connecticut. I was born in New Britain. I lived in Bristol, Connecticut for a while, lived in Clinton for a while. I ultimately lived in Farmington, Connecticut when I eventually moved out to Utah. And I still have family in Connecticut. So, you know, Connecticut is the nutmeg state. We joke, we call it the unconstitutional state because of all the ridiculous gun laws that are out there. But it is a beautiful state. We've got Long Island Sound. We've got mountains. We've got some gorgeous, gorgeous areas out there.
Well, don't worry. Virginia is catching up with that whole ridiculous gun laws.
No doubt about it.
No doubt about that. And then our friend Subtle Serpent, Kevin, how far is the diner up the highway, he says.
Oh, gosh. So, yeah, this is Subtle Serpent Survival is a good buddy of mine. He's also
Mr. Gaston.
Yeah, I love Gaston. He's a 1980s, you know, friend of mine too, in terms of like all the movies and whatnot. And you know, there's a diner just up the road, right? That's what Sheriff Teasel told Rambo, and Rambo, of course, turned around and he walked right back into town, and you know,
That's good stuff. I will throw this up here just because my wife is probably in the next room. She's like, if I don't, she'll be like, why didn't you put my question up? And it's not a question, it's a statement. You're a history buff, so you realize that Robert Augustus Toombs, Secretary of the Confederacy, my wife's maiden name is Burnside, as in direct descendant of General Burnside with the Battle of Antietam. And no matter what you say, love, we held you off for 3 days. That was 3 days against the entire Union Army. So I'm still calling it a win. I don't care what you say. My lovely wife there. Man, we blew away just about a whole hour. Let's talk about the new book. The new book here, Beyond the Field, and the inspiration behind that and what people can kind of expect when they get this book from you.
Sure thing. So Beyond the Field was a natural extension of the first book. So my first book, 101 Skills You Need to Survive in the Woods, wildly popular, Amazon bestseller. Like I've sold, I think 26,000 copies of it to this day. Like It's done well, right? And people, as soon as that book came out, they were like, when's your next book coming out? And for a while, I thought that Fieldcraft was going to publish that book. In fact, they told me, we're going to publish it. And then at one point it was Jocko is going to publish it. And then Black Rifle Coffee is going to publish it. And I'm like, okay, can we get this written down? I want a contract because I wrote the book in 6 weeks and I want to know where is it going? Because there's a lot of, we're going to, when you say we, who's we, right? Who's my committee? And they didn't know what they were doing. So I decided one of the first things I wanted to do when I started my new company, I'm like, I am going to get my second book published. And I decided to self-publish my book. So last year in January, I started the process. I went to church. I said a little prayer, submitted my book, and I got it published through Amazon. And it released on April 22nd of last year, which happens to be Earth Day. It happens to be the birthday of my late mother. And I dedicated my first book to my father, and my second book is dedicated to my mother. And Beyond the Field, what it's about, it's all of the skills that you should be learning when you say, well, what next, right? Like you learn how to build a fire. Okay, great. That's a great baseline skill. You learn some basic knots. You understand how to set up a shelter. That's awesome. But now Beyond the Field is, okay, I know you can set up a shelter, but can you create a camp kitchen? And you say, hey, I'm really good at survival fishing. Well, how about regular fishing? How about hunting? How about off-road driving and winter camping and backpacking? So Beyond the Field is a combination of all these skill sets that someone might want to get into once they learn a baseline. And that baseline can come from learning from me. It can come learning from Craig Caudill, Nature Reliance School, the guys at ESSE, the guys at Maine Primitive Skills School. It doesn't matter where you get your baseline knowledge. I'm going to help you get to the next level by giving you a whole bunch of information. And it's a reference book. But by far my favorite chapter, the chapter that I think is the most important in the whole book, is the last chapter, which it's almost been out a year now, so I don't mind letting the cat out of the bag. The last chapter is how to teach and how to teach outdoor skills. So I walk people through creating a educational philosophy, different methods of teaching, whether it's student-centered or instructor-centered, how to create measurable objectives, all of this. And then, every chapter has dozens of tips in it. So it's been a book that in the past year has done extremely well. I'm nearing in on a number that I set as my, not my 50-meter target or 100-meter target. It's like my 1,000-meter target, and I'm very close to it. Like I'm like 42 books away from that target. So I'm hoping you listeners will purchase it. Maybe before April 22nd. That's my goal. But I do have a couple of events where folks will probably be able to help me get past that number. So that's the second book. It's advanced skills.
I'm going to jump on and grab one tonight. I am going to get one. And then I'll just bring it with me because at Mountain Readiness May, you're going to be coming out Saturday. You're going to be teaching the 10 S's of fire making. And of course, you've teamed up with Exotac as well with this. So we're going to be doing that, guys. He's going to be out there, and then we're going to be doing a book signing after that. So I can bring my book out there and get a signature from you. But what is the 10 S's for everybody out here? Like you know what? Yeah. Let's save it. Let's don't even get into that. We're going to save it. If you guys want to know what the 10 S's is, either Google it or come to Mountain Readiness for Saturday to hang out with us and get a book. So we have blown through it, but I always put down a question that I want to ask. Well, I've got two of them here. And this one here, I got to go with this one. So you got to bail out. Take your pick. It's the end of the world, zombie apocalypse, what it is. You can't take it's not a firearm. It's a clothes on your back. What is the three items that you grab and why?
All right. I'm going to go over the top with this one because you know what? The question's over the top, right? We're already talking about zombies.
Yeah,
so
right. Ridiculousness. Yes.
Go a little bit bizarre. All right. So the first thing I'm going to grab, I've got a reproduction of the First Blood knife. And listen, if I'm going to be running for my life, I am going to use that knife to grab a piece of rotten canvas to make a poncho. Because even though I have perfectly good clothes, if I'm going to be fighting zombies, I want to at least look cool doing it. So I'm going to put on that rotten canvas, tie it with a piece of wire, and maybe put a canvas headband over my forehead, because when the zombies draw first blood, they just started a war that they're going to need plenty of zombie body bags for. So I'm going to grab my reproduction First Blood knife, which is from Newt Martin, rest in peace, Newt, because that's a good first item. Now, second item that I'm going to grab for the zombie apocalypse, that type of thing, I'm going to go down to the local armory and I'm going to steal a tank. Now, I know that Rick Grimes rode through Atlanta on a horse, and that's cool, but he got to a tank. And, if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'm going to have some type of armored vehicle, and that's where I'll just do my errands in. So, if I need to go get a cup of coffee, and, I know that the zombie barista is, half severed from the waist, but she still makes a fantastic, honey badger coffee. So I'm probably going to go with a tank. So I've got my knife, I've got my tank. The third thing, this one might be controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Hit it.
The third thing, I need Danny Trejo from Dusk Till Dawn with the vest with all the knives. Right?
Yes.
Because we know that in any good zombie movie, there's always the supporting character who has an unbelievable skill set. And it's either Danny Trejo from Dusk Till Dawn with all the knives, or Desperado with all the knives, I should say, or it's got to be a female character that is equally tough. And I'm thinking maybe the girl with the straight razor from Maximum Overdrive. Yet another 80s classic movie. So
that's beautiful.
Tank, Rambo knife, and sexy brunette with a straight razor.
It's almost like you've done this before.
Oh, I've had plenty of weird dreams. When they tell you not to eat before you go to bed, it causes weird dreams. I say embrace it. You'll have some
embrace
good
every
thoughts.
single bit of it.
Yeah,
man. I've had a blast. It was a great show. It was great hanging out, Kevin. I can't wait to meet you face to face in May, man. So thank you for coming on, and maybe we can do this again in the future.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm happy to jump on anytime.
Awesome. Well, if you stick around a couple minutes after we end the show, guys, there you have it. That was an awesome show hanging out with Kevin Estela. Remember, May 1st, 2nd, 3rd, he will be there the 2nd on Saturday. Check him out. Pop that lower third up again, would you, Russ, man? Guys, scan that and get your book. He's only a couple books away. Help him do this and to meet that goal so he can set him another goal for book 3 when it comes out. But you guys know the drill. Stay safe. Stay ready. We'll see you next Monday.